What's up, guys? It's Connor or Cplant underscore on Twitter and whatever. Um, but yeah, I wanted to break down a little bit what fantasy football wins above replacement, what it means, how to use it, kind of like just a rundown on its usefulness and how it should make you start to think differently about fantasy football than you might already think. So, here I've brought up the wins above replacement sheet that I created, and here is the starting point. I made a video yesterday explaining how everything is calculated, so if you wanted to know about that, then you can watch that one. I'll leave that link in the description. But so I've actually created it so you could look at expected fantasy points also, and this is an interesting thing that we can look at in a little bit. But I first want to break down the basics, kind of what this stuff means. Okay. Um. So, WAR is really just looking at the wins or the probability you'd beat the average team with the player that you have in each given week, and then you just add it all up and then subtract that by the replacement level player win probabilities. It's changing right now because I had messed with this parameter, but yeah. So here's what it looks like for 2022. And obviously, it looks different. The positional curves look a little bit different on a yearly basis. But in a 12-team league, in these league settings, which is full PPR, I believe, um, this right here, what I'm going to, is how I've set up the scoring settings. So I can actually change what the scoring settings are on my end. Um, that will influence the fantasy points in here, right? Um, so right now, yeah, it's set to just regular full PPR, no bonuses or anything like that. And so here is the overall WAR, and you see the leader of last year was Eckler, number one overall. Then we have Kelsey and Mahomes. This is a 6 point passing touchdown. Yeah, it is. That's why most people play in four, I believe. So that'll change the outcome here. Just give it a second to update. I don't know why I put my phone on do not disturb, but it still gives me notifications. I That goes against what do not disturb is for, you know? All right. Anyways, so you just go to Z to A to sort by wins above replacement. Then you have Eckler, Kelsey, McCaffrey, Justin Jefferson, Hurts, Mahomes. As you can see, this might be a shocking kind of thing, but quarterbacks in one quarterback leagues, because this is one quarterback, do matter. They do provide a large amount of value above replacement. Um, it's just picking the quarterback. So Hurts from last year, you could have got Hurts in the later rounds, and it would have paid off more than if you had taken Mahomes early, right? So there's definitely an opportunity cost. It's an opportunity cost problem. So you want to get guys who have upside for a high WAR, but at cheapest prices as possible, right? This also doesn't adjust for playoffs, where playoffs are probably like three times as valuable as the regular season, simply because you want to win in the playoffs, right? But you can't predict when players are going to score. Like that's kind of um, something that you're not going to really be able to know. I will say though that rookies are the only position in the second half of the season we know are verifiably generally better in the second half of the season. So those are interesting players to target, because they could wind up being higher in WAR in the second half than the first by a significant amount. And if that's the case, you're getting a lot more value from those players. Um, because you're drafting rookies later, right? Um, so as you can see, it's Eckler number 1 last year, Kelce number 2. Huge positional advantage with him last year. He also had a great scoring year for himself. Um, and then we have McCaffrey, Jefferson, Hurts, Mahomes, Jacobs. Jacobs was a great value pick, right? We don't see many late round receivers here at all. Like none of these top receivers here were you could have gotten late. Um, that is so for Mahomes, Hurts. It depends on what league you're in. If you're in a league where one quarterback league where quarterback isn't valued, you could have got Mahomes a lot later than he should have went in like the 5th round or something. That's a huge value. Kelce, you could have gotten like the 2nd round. That's also a huge value. The running backs though, you couldn't get Eckler or McCaffrey late, but you could have got Jacobs late, and that's a ginormous value to have Jacobs as your RB1. The receivers, you had to take them early if you wanted to hit, basically. And I believe this is generally a theme that stays true. I mean, we had Cooper Kupp in 2021 bust out into the scene and become the receiver 1 overall by far. That doesn't happen very often, obviously. It doesn't happen very often at any position. Actually, probably quarterback, it happens more often. But I do wonder with the nature of the league, having more young elite quarterbacks now, I do wonder if the predictability of quarterback is higher. Well, it is verifiably higher over the last 3 or 4 years than it has been. And so that kind of makes an early quarterback pick not as bad. If you took Mahomes in with the first overall pick, I legitimately would be like, oh, it's bad because you could have got him a little later, but at the same time, he's probably going to finish in this top 12 of WAR with a higher degree of certainty that he finishes there than any other guy, damn near. So unless you're talking about Kelce, but Kelce's already hurt in week 1, so. But yeah, so generally when you're looking at WAR, you want to get the guys that get the most WAR at the end of the season, by the end of the season, and position kind of doesn't matter, unless you think that you can get value at like running back later, which I think you generally can regardless of the season. I think that's generally always the case, because not only are you looking for WAR guys for the full season, but obviously once you get towards the end, all of fantasy is super shallow. So you want to get guys that could have stretches of games. And so think about players that are not as great whenever they have stretches of good games. When are those stretches of good games? When are they most likely to happen? Who's most likely to have them, right? Think about that. And so the first thing that comes to my mind is a running back that is a backup but then gets thrust into a full-time role because the starter is injured. Now, to me, that seems like, okay, well, now that player is going to be given all this volume, valuable volume, and potentially finishing as a top running back for 3, 4, 5 straight weeks. And that type of player, to me, is a lot more valuable than a receiver who, might have like the starter get hurt, but the receiver still has to earn their volume. And so if the receiver's not that great, they're not going to earn that volume and they're not going to get that streak of games. We saw T. Higgins last year kind of take over for Jamar Chase, but even then, I think out of the 4 games that Jamar Chase missed, right, I think it was, hold on, let's see if we could find it real quick. So Chase missed this stretch of games. You can tell by one of them is a bye week. I believe it was week 10 was a bye week, right? And you can see, here, let's filter it by Cincinnati. You can see Chase had these weeks where he was out, and then T. Higgins wound up only being better than a replacement guy, because replacement level was like 4.46, which is pretty high, but you know, that's kind of just the next best guy you could start off of your bench. And so T. Higgins literally provided like replacement to below replacement level value in the first 2 games that Chase was out. It wasn't until week 11 and 12 where he actually provided you, kind of elite value. Um, and even then, they weren't like week winning performances. They're like 20-point performances, which are obviously great, but they don't win a week. I would say 25 plus is probably what's winning your week. Generally 25, probably closer to like 30 plus there, if I'm being honest. Or week winning weeks. And those are like 70% win probability. But yeah, so even in like probably the best scenario where the backup receiver gets the starting role, he still didn't provide a full like 3 games of a streak of good play, right? It was literally just the 2 games. Had they not had a bye in week 10, would he have? Maybe, but I think it's more predictable for a backup running back that's a clear backup to have, stretches of weeks. And so that makes obviously the bigger leverage point is to fade running back a bit and try to get that guy that gets 3-4 weeks of top tier running back production without paying for it, right? And so if you can get that, you're already stringing together a overall streamed RB2 or RB1 performance that's like a top 24 back, right? And so because there just isn't a lot of backs, and so getting kind of a replacement level back that performs at a high level because of their starter being hurt, that's more beneficial to you than having a replacement level receiver that may or may not perform when their starter gets hurt. So yeah, that's and also, when you think about taking a running back early, this is basically turned into a whole zero RB thing. But when you think about taking a running back early, and you see this, right? This is actually okay, cool. And you see this like, okay, well, Dalvin Cook, you took him last year probably he was like probably the 6th overall pick potentially in your draft. I think that's around where his ADP was. But he finished all the way down at 0.71 WAR, which would have absolutely killed your team because the expectation for a top 6 pick is that they finish within the top 6 of wins above replacement, which wasn't even close to being true, right? If I go back to the WAR sheet and I unfilter this, we'll see how much WAR the 6th pick got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So Mahomes was the 6th best in wins above replacement, and he gave you 2.18 wins above replacement. The 0.71 is a massive bust of a pick. You would have been better off to take Tyreek Hill, to take Devontae Adams, to take Jefferson, potentially if he was there. I don't remember exactly what the ADP was last year, but you would have been better off to take some of these other guys, Diggs, even if they're a bust at receiver still. You at least have kind of more of a floor and more safety. Where Kupp got hurt and missed half the season and still finished better than Dalvin Cook. Granted, if you had the 6th pick, you probably weren't able to pick Kupp because he was going in the first like 3 picks. But this is what I mean, where they have super high floors, and it almost seems like, in PPR here, it looks like receiver is actually more scarce. It's slightly more deep right here in the top end, but it's more scarce after that. Well, it was more scarce. Generally speaking, they're about the same level of scarcity in running back and receiver, and so as you can see right here. But yeah, it's I just want to double check the scoring settings. Yep. But as you can see, it's like this is probably another useful thing to look at, where you see the positions and how they compare. Yes, we had Eckler as the number one, but after that, CMC too. These two, this is kind of uncharacteristic of running back scoring also, because these guys get hurt at a higher rate. And so we had two top running backs that stayed healthy the entire season, which generally, is kind of a rare occurrence. Also, I want to mention Jonathan Taylor last year was a even more ginormous bust than Dalvin Cook was, where he finished all the way down here, and ironically just as good as Jamal Williams, who was a late round to waiver wire ad. And so Jonathan Taylor, when he busted, he fell all the way down to 0.24. The expectation for him was probably, for a lot of people, taking him at the RB1 overall. For a lot of people, the expectation was that he would finish with like 2.85 WAR. He finished with 0.24. That absolutely killed your team. You had like basically no chance unless you hit on other positions. So yeah, it's more risky, I think, if you go running back early, generally speaking. I think there's an interesting trend going on in the NFL right now, which is too high safety shells, and so it's forcing offenses to play with a more yak-centric approach. And so part of what I see so far in the 2023 NFL season, I see a lot of flats and hitches and short routes trying to attack the underneath. And when defenses are able to stop the underneath also, it's very hard for some of these offenses to get going, because if you can't hit over top, you cannot hit underneath, like, what are you supposed to do? I guess your only option is to run the ball, right? And I think a lot of teams are still even continually trying to hit the short routes, and they don't always work, it seems so far. And we've seen some teams have success with them, but we saw the Eagles and the Vikings matchup last night, and it almost seemed like the Eagles offensive line was getting like 3 to 4 yards of push on every play. It was kind of ridiculous. Swift was just not even having to do much except just run straight through the hole. Yes, he's a pretty decent back. We've seen his missed tackles force always been pretty good, but in a vacuum, I don't think he ever has a performance like that. But with that situation in the scheme, he does. We saw Jalen Hurts struggle, and he literally was hitting Goddard on short routes and not getting much of anything on them. So I do wonder if some coaches are going to shift their philosophy away from getting the tight ends the ball in short area and try to get some receivers more involved in the short area. But yeah, it's been a weird 2023 season so far, and I think it's interesting to see how, if the receiver or zero RB is going to pay off or not this year. It may not, because of the way defenses are playing now. It's like it's going to be very yak dependent, potentially, and so that could create a lot of volatility, where some of these top receivers don't actually perform to their ADP. So, and then by nature, that would cause the running backs to be better. And so I'm starting to think that maybe it might be a shifting in the tides in all of the NFL, where the run game actually becomes more prevalent again, just like it used to be back in the day, which is kind of bizarre to me, considering the pass has always been more efficient, the pass has always been more effective. Yeah, it's coming to a point where defenses are literally just selling out to the pass, which is the smart thing to do, and it's actually working. I didn't think it would actually work to this extent, um, and kind of cripple these offenses. Or maybe offenses just haven't adjusted yet. Maybe offenses just haven't learned how to attack these defenses, and they will, and things will go back to where they were before, where offenses are very pass heavy and pass centric. But yeah, that's so generally when you're drafting or trading or anything like that, you see this general trend, right? Where all the top players at each position, right? When we look at flex, there's a lot of value at flex. So it's important to have an elite flex spot guy, of course. But as you can see, each position, the value that you're getting at the top end is so much higher than anyone else, right? Kelsey's like nearly 3 times more valuable than Hockenson last year. Justin Jefferson is nearly 2 times valuable than Stephon Diggs last year. Austin Eckler is nearly 3 times more valuable than Nick Chubb last year. Jalen Hurts is nearly 2 times valuable, or actually, he is about 2 times valuable than Joe Burrow. And so this is extremely important to recognize that the top guys are so much better. It's not even close. And so when you have top guys, you could literally fill the rest of your team with waiver wire ads, and you legitimately would win at a high rate. And so it's almost suboptimal to have a roster in which you have a bunch of like mid-tier guys. You'd want to have studs and duds. But the issue is predicting who the studs are going to be through the rest of the season and who the duds will be. Or, well, it doesn't matter about duds, but who the studs will be and who the guys that are just middling are going to be. Like currently, A.J. Brown is someone that I was heavily targeting this offseason because, it was brought to my attention that A.J. Brown was in a lot of run-heavy situations because the Eagles were leading by a lot. And so, you got to imagine that the Eagles pass more when they're in closer games. But last night, it just appeared that Jalen Hurts struggled, the passing game struggled, but they were able to just run the ball with extreme efficiency that I've honestly, as a football fan, have never seen almost. That was just pure domination by the Eagles O-line. I've never seen anything like it where they were just running at will and not able to get, and the Vikings couldn't stop it at all. So yeah, I can see if a team can do that, they're just gonna continue to do that. And so it's a very, very weird scenario for A.J. Brown in the overall Philadelphia offense. I think, we won't see the Eagles offensive line dominate that much going forward. I think that was kind of a fluke. Well, at least that's what I think right now, because I can't imagine other teams around the league watched film and continue to let that happen, right? Or maybe they do. Maybe they're just like, oh, fine, we'll let them run 30 times with DeAndre Swift. We're just not going to let them beat us through the air with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. That also could be the case. It's just awfully scary because he's potentially not going to get high volume because the offense won't have high volume, not because he's not a good player. I think A.J. Brown in a Minnesota type of situation absolutely thrives and excels and is insanely good. But unfortunately, that just might not be the case. And so selling A.J. Brown is going to be tricky. Like, if you were to tell me that, okay, A.J. Brown's going to finish where he finished last season, and Justin Jefferson will also finish the same, so will Tyreek Hill, then I'm literally fine with trading A.J. Brown and another top-tier piece or a guy that's in the middle top tier. So, like, A.J. Brown and, I don't know, DeAndre Hopkins and A.J. Brown. If you can do that for Justin Jefferson or Tyreek Hill, then you do that, honestly. If you believe that that AJ Brown finishes same as last year, that's a super beneficial trade. So there's an opportunity where if you're absolutely correct in your evaluation of the rest of the season projections, 100% correct, you could, in theory, make trades that look kind of crazy where you're giving up a stud and another player that's a kind of really good for the top tier stud. There's a scenario where those trades work and you benefit massively from them. The problem is predicting if that will actually come true or if that's not right. Right? If you do that and it turns out that AJ Brown actually finishes above Jefferson and D Hop finishes about where he was last year, then you're screwed because you basically just had the value of Jefferson and plus Diop instead of having Jefferson and then a waiver wire or replacement level player, right? So it depends on your level of confidence in your risk mitigation, right? If you don't want to take on a lot of risk, then I guess you just stick with AJ Brown and hope that things get better. Yeah, it's a very weird situation that I don't ever know what to make of it, and I wish there was a better way to understand the risk that you'd be taking by taking that trade or doing that trade or something along those lines. I'm not even sure if you'd be able to get that trade to go through if the Justin Jefferson owner would even be okay with letting go, because I think inherently people know that these top tier guys at the very very top tippity top are very good, right? And are I think in your gut, that Justin Jefferson you don't want to give up for AJ Brown and D Hop, but generally speaking, technically that should be kind of close in value, right? Anyways, that's kind of how wins above replacement works and how you want to think about it. You want to aim for the ultimate upside in your drafts and your waiver wire pickups and everything that you do. You just want these top tier guys. It's not groundbreaking. It's not, not anything that's like a silver bullet or anything. You still have to predict players at a high degree of accuracy. And yeah, so and even then, you could literally have all the top guys in wins above replacement, and then once you get to your playoffs, lose in one of the last two games, assuming you have the bye, and boom, you lost the championship because a lot of this is luck, right? You want to maximize your luck by knowing that you have to optimize for upside, right? All right, so that's it. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments and I'll answer them for you or try my best. If you have any suggestions for future videos, let me know also. And peace out.